in the horror genre. I'm your host, Nicole, and it's time to share another dark tale. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders were a series of brutal attacks that took place between February and May 1946 in the border towns of Texarkana, Texas, and Arkansas. An unidentified assailant, later dubbed the Phantom Killer, targeted young couples parked on secluded roads, often called lovers' lanes. In total, 5 people were killed and several others injured. The attacks caused widespread panic. Residents armed themselves, installed locks, and avoided going out at night. Despite a massive investigation involving local police, the Texas Rangers, and the FBI, the Phantom Killer was never definitively identified or captured. The mystery, randomness, and lack of resolution turned the case into enduring folklore and later inspired the Town That Dreaded Sundown. Welcome back, friends and weirdos. So we have a little bit of a pivot this month. Originally, I was supposed to be covering Frailty with friend of the show, Logan, and also I was going to release a bonus episode on Twin Peaks. And both of those got rescheduled. It happens. So I originally had planned on doing a Town That Dreaded Sundown episode later in the year. But since everything sort of fell through this month, I decided to reshuffle some things and go ahead and cover it since I just saw it. And the reason why I wanted to cover it later in the year is because, as you know, we're currently in the Religion and Horror series, round 2. And Town That Dreaded Sundown was going to kick off a different series. And that series is Southern Gothic. As you know, I was born and raised in Arkansas, which some people don't understand that is the South. And it definitely is the South. I've seen people put it in the Midwest. Not accurate. Now, we're blended. You know, you go into South Arkansas and we're a little blended with Texas. We're a little blended with Missouri up where I am in the Ozarks. We're a little blended with Tennessee. We're a little blended with Oklahoma. But we are Southern. We're not the Deep South, but we are Southern. In addition to being born and raised in Arkansas, I lived in East Texas when I was a kid, which is sort of Southern. Texas as a whole, I would not consider Southern. But East Texas, you know, shares a border with Louisiana and I think is culturally very similar to the South. Spend some time in Central Florida, which is definitively not Southern at all. But, you know, you go a little north and you're back in the South. And so now I'm back in Arkansas, back in my roots and happy to be here. So every region has, you know, a very specific culture, specific stories, specific types of storytelling, different legends, different cryptids, and those things are all really interesting. But of course, because I'm from the South, I find some of our Southern stories really interesting. And I feel like there's a lot of ground to cover in sort of the Southern Gothic niche. Now, not all of the movies I'm going to cover in this series can definitively be called Southern Gothic. That is its own genre, but I think it's sort of the best way to label the sort of exploration that we're going to go on. And so we're going to kick it off with an Arkansas story because there are not a lot of horror movies set in Arkansas. The two that are most well known are The Legend of Boggy Creek and The Town That Dreaded Sundown, both directed by local filmmaker, Arkansas filmmaker, Charles B. Pierce. Now, I have not seen The Legend of Boggy Creek yet, but it is based on the Fouke monster. from Fouke, Arkansas. And from what I understand, he's, a Bigfoot type cryptid. So that one is on my list. I'll probably be visiting it sometime this summer. But back to The Town That Dreaded Sundown. This is a really interesting movie, mainly because it's based on a true story. There really was this strange masked man who assaulted and murdered several folks in 1946. They never caught him. And so it's interesting that this movie is based on something true. And it's interesting that there's not just one, but there are two movies. There was the remake in 2014. And it's interesting because both of the films, this 1976 and the 2014 version, were both filmed to some extent in Texarkana. So it really happened in Texarkana. Both movies were filmed in Texarkana. So all of those things just make it hyper local to me. As I mentioned, this was made by Charles B. Pierce, Arkansan. It was released in 1976. It had a small budget. Well, I guess at the time, this was a mid-budget. $400,000 was its budget, and it earned between $4 and $5 million. And had kind of a mixed reception upon release, but seems to have really garnered a lot of respect over the years. I think it's gotten a lot more respect now than it had at the time. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as I dig in. But another reason I'm talking about this movie, and the reason I just saw this movie, is because my mom and I, a couple of weeks ago, went to Texarkana for the 50th anniversary screening put on by Onset Cinema. Onset Cinema is a company ran by, their Instagram account is Myers House NC. And Kenny is the name of the guy who runs it. And he goes around to all over the country and shows movies like where they were filmed in one of the filming locations. And I've been aware of this for a long time. I've wanted to do it for a long time. And I've also, ever since I moved back to Arkansas, have wanted to go to Texarkana for the yearly screening because the town screens this movie every year. So I've been wanting to do it anyway. And when I saw that Onset Cinema was going to be doing it for the 50th anniversary, I was like, this is it. Gotta go, gotta do it. So we did that on March 15th, and it was so fun. It was on a Sunday evening, and like a lot of small downtowns, it was dead down there. So Mom and I went a few hours before the screening started just to hang out, to grab some dinner. And walking around the downtown sort of made me feel like we were in 1946, where like everyone had rolled up the sidewalks because they were all afraid to be out. And also downtown Texarkana is, how do I say this respectfully? It is a, deteriorating town, and you can tell that it used to be vibrant and it used to be beautiful and it used to be hopping, but there are so many not just empty but abandoned buildings. There's a really beautiful old train station called Union Station that is just like hollowed out. A lot of the facades that were used in the 76 version that were still like probably operational buildings are just clearly have just been abandoned. Which is a little sad, but I love old buildings and I love old places. And Texarkana is like a special one, I think. You see a lot of little downtowns that are old, but Texarkana seems like it's just on a grander scale. The buildings are bigger, they're more beautiful. The fact that they're just abandoned is more tragic. So I would love to see a little bit of life come back to Texarkana. I enjoyed sort of roaming this, desolate landscape down there. But of course, I would love it if some of these buildings could come back to life instead of continuing to deteriorate. But anyway, it's a little bit of a rabbit trail. But another cool thing about it is that one of the main roads that runs through the middle of downtown, on one side you're on Texas, on one side you're on Arkansas. And there's actually a building, like a state building that half the buildings in Texas, half the buildings in Arkansas. And so you can go and like take a selfie and you can put one foot in each state. And it's just really novel and really unique. So that was really cool just to be there and to walk around and experience that. Also, a cool thing about it is that Andy Abel, who played the Phantom in the 2014 version, he was there, like signing autographs and stuff. And before the movie, Kenny and Andy took the group on a little walking tour of downtown and showed us where things were filmed. And Andy was able to, tell us about, we shot this scene on this night in this building and this happened and like my shoe fell off and this happened. And so it was really cool to hear stories from somebody who was there when the 2014 version was filmed. And it was just a lot of fun. It was like nice when we got there, and then a storm rolled in. And so it was like cold and windy when we were walking around, which was like a little uncomfortable, but again, added to the atmosphere. It was just a lot of fun. And so the day after that, Mom and I drove out to Spring Lake Park, which is where the famous trombone scene from the 76 version was filmed. And it's also the place where it wasn't Spring Lake Park in 1946, but one of the original murders happened there on a random like remote road. And then, years later, it's the location of Spring Lake Park. So that's another just like really important setting to the movie and to the events, in addition to all of the cool downtown buildings. So I would say if you have a chance to go to one of these on-set cinema events, definitely do it. Our event was small, intimate. It was like 50 people maybe. And it was just a good group. It was a good vibe. I would love to do it again someday. I know that they do a Shining screening in Oregon at the Timberline. I would love to do that. I had a Lost Boys t-shirt on, and Kenny was like, "Oh, I wish you could come out to our Lost Boys event." And I would love to do that. I would travel for that one. So anyway, yeah, if you get a chance to go to on-set cinema and you're a horror fan, you got to treat yourself. And another thing I want to mention before I get into the meat of the movie is if you're interested in learning more about the true story of the Phantom Killer and the Moonlight Murders, there's a podcast that we listen to on the way to Texarkana called the Moonlight Murders Podcast. And I thought that it was very good. You can listen to the whole thing in about 2 hours, but they do a really good job of laying out the facts of the case, walking you through what happened, walking you through, some of the suspects. And it's a really good account of what really happened. Because, as you know, you watch the movie enough times and like that feels like the real story, even though it's not. And so I would definitely encourage you, if you're interested in the true story at all, if you're interested in history, if you're interested in true crime, go listen to the Moonlight Murders podcast. Okay, so this is your spoiler warning. I'm going to get into the synopsis and all of my thoughts on The Town That Dreaded Sundown, 1976, and a little bit of 2014. So without further ado, let's get into The Town That Dreaded Sundown.
Samuel P. Fuller, age 24. Linda Mae Jenkins, age 19. Brutally attacked March 3rd, 1946. Howard W. Turner, 29. Emma Lou Cook, 17. Bodies discovered in a wooded area on March 24th. Roy Allen, 17. Peggy Loomis, 15. Both found dead April 14th in Spring Lake Park. Floyd Reed, age 34. Murdered in his home on May 3rd. Mrs. Reed shot twice, but survived. This man's identity is unknown. He was believed to be between 30 and 40 years old. He wore a white hood and was known only as the Phantom Killer. World War II had just ended. In Texarkana, Arkansas, boys had come home to their families. Husbands reunited with their wives. It was a happy, peaceful time. Until the Phantom Killer struck. For 4 months, he held an entire city in the icy grip of terror. Now, Charles B. Pierce brings this incredible, shocking, and true story to the screen in The Town That Dreaded Sundown, starring Academy Award winner Ben Johnson as Captain J.D. Morales of the Texas Rangers.
We got a cold-blooded killer here. A man who nobody sees. A phantom who, so far, hasn't made any mistakes.
Andrew Prine as Deputy Norman Ramsey of the Texarkana Sheriff's Department.
The only thing we really do know is that we've got a very strange person on our hands.
The Town That Dreaded Sundown, a true story.
Occurring about 8 months after World War II, Texarkana is a peaceful town, its citizens optimistic about the future. The calm is shattered on March 3, 1946, when Sammy Fuller and Linda Mae Jenkins park on a lover's lane. A hooded man disables their car, attacks Sammy, and abducts Linda. She is later found barely alive, having suffered brutal, animalistic injuries. At the hospital, authorities learn she was not raped but severely bitten. Sheriff Barker urges Police Chief Sullivan to warn young couples about secluded areas. 3 weeks later, Deputy Norman Ramsey investigates another lover's lane during a storm and discovers 2 more victims. Buddy Turner shot dead and Emma Lou Cook found bound to a tree. Ramsey glimpses the masked killer fleeing. Panic spreads quickly. Residents arm themselves and the town grows fearful. Sheriff Barker calls in Texas Ranger Captain J.D. Morales, known as the Lone Wolf, who takes over the case, dubs the attacker the Phantom, and assigns Ramsey to assist him. Ramsey theorizes the killer strikes every 21 days, prompting increased patrols and decoy operations ahead of a high school prom. On April 14th, Peggy Loomis and her boyfriend Roy Allen leave the dance and head to Spring Lake Park. The Phantom ambushes them, killing Roy and capturing Peggy. In one of the film's most disturbing moments, he murders her using a knife attached to a trombone slide. As the investigation continues, Morales consults psychiatrist Dr. Kress, who profiles the Phantom as a highly intelligent, sadistic man in his mid-30s to 40s. Unbeknownst to them, the killer overhears their conversation. A suspect, Eddie Ledoux, is later apprehended after a reported robbery and briefly confesses, but Morales doubts his guilt despite identification from a witness. On May 3rd, the Phantom targets Helen and Floyd Reed. After Floyd is shot through a window, Helen is attacked inside their home. Though gravely wounded, she escapes to a nearby house, surviving the assault. This attack deepens the town's paranoia, leading residents to barricade their homes. Police eventually track a vehicle linked to earlier murders to a sand pit, where Morales and Ramsey confront the Phantom. Morales wounds him, but the killer escapes to the woods, evading capture by leaping past a moving train. Despite continued efforts, the Phantom is never found. Life in Texarkana appears to return to normal. However, as The Town That Dreaded Sundown premieres in a local theater, the final image reveals the Phantom's boots as he stands in line, suggesting he may still be among them, unseen and at large.
And if you should ask people here on the streets what they believe happened to the Phantom Killer, most would say that he is still living here and is walking free.
So, I suppose I should answer the question, what is Southern about this movie? The main thing being, it takes place in the South. It was shot in the South. The filmmaker is from the South. And so I think that's enough to qualify it as a Southern film. But there's more going on here. It's, of course, first and foremost, like a true crime movie, a slasher movie. That's what it is. But I think there are a couple of other themes happening here that, to me, are Southern, that resonate with me as somebody from the South. And one of those things is small town secrets. And Texarkana in this movie is certainly like a small town with a secret. The secret being that we just got back from the war and everything is happy and optimistic and beautiful and the future is full of promise and we're young and we have our whole future ahead of us. And yet there is this horrible, mysterious, violent, masked man in our midst. And how can that be in this perfect, shiny, white picket fence world that we're supposed to believe in? And I think that you see that in a lot of sort of Southern Gothic stories. You see that in Flannery O'Connor. You see that a little bit of William Faulkner. And of course, I'm talking about literature. I'm not talking about movies. But this idea that these rural places where life is supposed to be simple and easy and there's no crime like the big cities, there's often a lot of darkness and a lot of ugliness lurking like just below the surface. Of course, Stephen King is the master of this small town secret type of story, and a lot of the stories that his stories are almost all set in Maine, but I recognize a lot of my own sort of small town experience in his stories. Also, the idea that there's this unsolved murder. I think every small town has some crime and honestly probably a murder that either was or was not solved. But almost every small town has like, oh, that house, such and such was killed in that house. Or for one of the big ones in my area is in Alma, Arkansas. This girl, her name was Morgan Nick. She was taken from a baseball field and no one knows what happened to her. They've never found her. They've never found her body. It's just this big mystery. And so I think the Town That Dreaded Sundown has a lot of that kind of real world lore that gets passed down through generations and becomes part of the fabric of the town's history. And in this case, it's even more impactful because this isn't just a story that was written that could be an allegory for, small town crime and small town mysteriousness. It's based on a real case, as I've already said. So I think that this movie works on a lot of levels. But the fact that it has this sort of unsolved mystery, if you will, really lends itself to being a true small town Southern story. So, of course, the original reason why I was interested in this movie is because of its Arkansas setting. I think I saw it for the first time maybe 10 years ago. I think I've only seen it twice, the initial viewing and then this past viewing in on-set cinema. And I think beyond the novelty for Arkansans of this just being our story, I do think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in this movie that's worth talking about and worth looking into if you're a horror fan at large. First of all is the style. It's filmed in this sort of documentary, mockumentary style. There's voiceover. It really does feel like a fictionalized, true crime documentary. And I think that sets it apart from other early slasher movies. It does put it a little more into the true crime territory than just straightforward horror. The setting of Texarkana also gives it a really authentic atmosphere that lends itself to this documentary style. It feels like a real place because it is a real place. The 1976 version was filmed, I believe, entirely in Texarkana or mostly in Texarkana, is because that's Charles V. Pierce is from Texarkana. It's not Hollywood sort of dressed up to look like Arkansas or Texas. It is Arkansas and Texas. And I think this gives it a reality that's a little bit like Blair Witch. As you remember, Blair Witch is that sort of like documentary style where you have shots of them filming the documentary and then you have like their actual footage. So that's something I did not think of the first time I watched it, but watching it this time, I was like, oh yeah, this is like a little bit Blair Witch-ish in its construct. Now, the thing that this movie is probably known most for, what it's most iconic for, is the Phantom Killer, the Masked Man. This is an early slasher. It's after Black Christmas, but before Halloween. So the slasher genre has not been established yet. There have been steps along the way. There's a lot of conversation to be had about this, but I think we can almost all agree that like Halloween cemented the slasher genre. A lot of movies did some of the same things. A lot of movies contributed to it, but Halloween is where it all gelled together. So that was in 1978. Town That Dreaded Sundown coming in 1976. It's like we're almost there, but we're not quite there yet. And so this Phantom Killer is like the birth of an icon. Because now, as you know, I mean, every slasher movie, you got to have a man in a mask. And the Phantom Killer really established the sackhead trope. As far as I know, the Phantom Killer is the first sackhead killer. And what's really interesting about it is that it's not manufactured by Charles B. Pierce. This is not manufactured by an art director or a filmmaker. The real Phantom Killer really wore a sack on his head. And that's possibly why it's so scary, and that's why it's endured. So just a list, and this is probably not a comprehensive list, but a list of some of the other sackhead killers. Most notably, Friday the 13th Part 2, which, as you may or may not know, is my favorite Friday the 13th. If you want to hear more about that, go listen to the Straight Chilling episode about Friday the 13th Part 2, in which I guested. Dark Night of the Scarecrow, another favorite, another one that I have an episode on. It's a little different because it's a scarecrow, but it's still a sackhead. The Strangers, we have a sackhead killer in there. Very creepy. Fear Street Part 2, In a Violent Nature, which came out recently. Triangle, which is an underseen gem in my opinion. And then The Orphanage, we have a little sackhead boy. And so this sackhead look has really become kind of not really a trope, but it's become kind of a common one in horror. And it all started with the Phantom Killer. Also, other notes on the Phantom Killer, like it's pretty brutal for the time. I feel like the documentary style sort of lends to that, and the fact that it's based on true events lends to that, because you're watching these things happen and you're thinking like this really happens to people. The trombone kill in particular is like pretty wild. I think depending on who you're with and when you watch it, it's either disturbing or silly, maybe a little bit of both, but I can only imagine an audience watching that in 1976, watching this woman get stabbed over and over again in this very odd way, must have been very disturbing. Another thing about the Phantom Killer that is interesting is that people have made a lot of parallels between the Phantom Killer and Zodiac. And I think that's mainly because it's a strange man with a mask on his face approaching couples, killing couples. Both of them used a gun at different times. Some people even think that the Phantom Killer left Texarkana and went somewhere else. And some of those people think that he went to California and became Zodiac. I'm not sure those timelines overlap, but people have put it out there. So again, it's just another reason why the Phantom Killer has become this sort of iconic legend. Now I will say I have one very big criticism of this movie, and it's a common criticism, and that is it has a pretty inconsistent tone. Like I said, it's pretty brutal for the time, and it definitely is, but there are these weird, goofy moments, these weird comedic sort of turns. There's a deputy named Sparkplug, who is played by the director, Charles B. Pierce. who is just real silly. There are a few different gags with him just being a goofball. He's dressed up as a girl, and one of them, him and another deputy are in this car trying to like lure the Phantom, and so he's got a wig and like rouge on. He's supposed to be the girl. And there's another gag where he's driving and he's a really bad driver. And so there's a couple of different scenes where he's like driving off the road into a lake, like just goofiness ensues. He reminds me a lot of Deputy Nash from Black Christmas, if you remember. He's the one that's just like very sort of like bumbling and naive. And so he and Sparkplug are very similar, but like Nash is sort of like endearing and he's very much on this fringe. And Sparkplug, he's sort of likable, but it's just too much. They interject too much of him into the story. And for some reason, there's a lot of that happening in the 70s. This sort of strange tone where there's a very serious movie with goofiness injected. They did that a lot in the 70s. I'm specifically thinking of Last House on the Left, which is a very disturbing movie even now. But there's this weird thing with the cops where the cops are bumbling and goofy, and they even play like goofy music during these cop scenes. And so, I don't know if this is Charles B. Pierce's flair or if he's doing what other horror movies were doing at the time. But the inconsistent tone really does hurt this story. It doesn't make it unwatchable, but it does kind of feel like it interrupts the flow of what we've got going on.
Oh, Lord, here comes your date. Hey, Sparkplug, aren't you a little lopsided? Go to hell, Ramsey. Keep it up, would you? Just keep it up.
Finally, I want to talk about the ending. One of the things I like most about this movie is the ending. I really appreciate that they kept it ambiguous instead of giving us a definite answer. They could have chosen to do that. They chose to change other things. They could have chosen to give us a nice, neat resolution. They could have picked one of the suspects in the actual case and decided to make him the killer, kind of like they did in From Hell, the Jack the Ripper movie. But they didn't do that. And I think we can really chalk that up to the authenticity of this film and the vision of Charles B. Pierce. A lot of the criticism I read from the time kept talking about how there is an unsatisfying ending and that it didn't go anywhere and they didn't even tell us who the killer was, that was like a shortcoming in the storytelling. And I actually think that's one of the strongest things about the storytelling. And so I can only imagine that Charles B. Pierce was probably getting pressure from people to like, hey, wrap this up. Give us like a nice, neat ending. And he didn't. And I really admire him for that. Also, a note about the end, they do almost catch him. They like find him, the Morales and the main deputy like follow a clue and find him and see him and chase him. But as the train is going by, he gets on the other side of the train. And so they're like shooting through the train, trying to see him, trying to get him. And they do shoot him, but he still gets away. And there's this really beautiful slow motion scene where the train is going by and he's running towards the camera in slow motion. And it's just a masterful shot. Just kudos to Charles B. Pierce specifically for that shot because it's beautiful. And then we get sort of this wrap up where they think he, disappeared into like the swamps. And did he die in the swamp? Did he get away? We don't know. And then we get this really meta ending, which is unheard of in the 70s, where they show the movie that we're watching opening in Texarkana, and they show us all these people standing in line, and we see the boots, and it's the same boots that we've seen the Phantom Killer wear the whole movie. So we are to believe that the Phantom Killer is still in Texarkana, and he's shown up for this premiere of this movie. And I mean, that if that is not an influence on Scream, I don't know what is. And it is an influence on Scream because we know in Scream, Sydney mentions, it reminds me of the Town That Dreaded Sundown. So Kevin Williamson definitely saw this movie and was definitely inspired by this movie. So I like to think that we maybe wouldn't have Scream if it wasn't for Charles B. Pierce and the Town That Dreaded Sundown. So I want to talk a little bit about the controversy of this movie. Upon release, like I said, there were mixed reviews. It was kind of not well received by critics. And also, the people in Texarkana did not appreciate this movie. They thought it was in bad taste. A lot of the families of the victims, of course, didn't like the changes that were made. And they changed all the names and everything. But family of the victims, of course, are watching this movie and they're seeing their family. And this was a really difficult time in the town. It was a dark chapter of the town. So they weren't real enthused that Charles B. Pierce decided to share this with the world and that this is what Texarkana would be known for. Also, the city of Texarkana filed a lawsuit against Charles B. Pierce specifically because of the marketing and the poster. The original poster has a big tagline on it that says, "In 1946, this man killed 5 people, and today he still lurks the streets of Texarkana, Arkansas." And so because of that statement, they were like, that's not true. You're going to scare people. You can't say this killer is still roaming our streets. What are you doing? And so Charles B. Pierce said, okay, I understand that. Let's take that off the marketing. And they did remove it where they could, but many, many posters still have that tagline. And if anybody out there wants to buy me an original one sheet with that tagline on it, hit me up and I'll give you my address. And another note about the poster is that it was illustrated by a man named Ralph McQuarrie. And Ralph McQuarrie did Town That Dreaded Sundown. He also painted the poster for The Legend of Boggy Creek and a couple of Charles B. Pierce's other movies. But this man went on to do Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Battlestar Galactica, Back to the Future, and the original Star Wars trilogy. Now, if you've ever seen the Town That Dreaded Sundown poster, you remember it. It is a fantastic poster. Honestly, it's probably one of the things that people remember the most about this movie. It's mainly the sack head, but then it has this beautiful sunset. It's a great, great poster. And so I am not surprised to hear that the illustrator, Ralph McQuarrie, went on to do giant things. As a matter of fact, according to Wikipedia, not only did Ralph McQuarrie work on Star Wars, like the poster art, but he did a lot of art direction, and he specifically designed the characters Darth Vader, Chewbacca, R2-D2, and C-3PO. So this man is an all-timer. He's a heavy hitter, and we are lucky to have his beautiful artwork for Town That Dreaded Sundown, tagline and all. But as for the controversy and the initial animosity that the city had towards this movie, it has become part of the fabric of the city. Now in Texarkana, they do yearly showings of this movie at Spring Lake Park, and people come out. The restaurant that we ate at, the Ice House, they have a poster right on the wall. So they've really come to embrace it. And I'm sure that has to do with a lot of factors, but I think probably once everyone who knew about the crimes firsthand had sort of passed on, I think the city was probably able to look at it with some distance. And like I said, also, the film's reputation has only gotten more favorable over time. So I think it's something that they now can understand as an important part of the fabric and the history of their town, made by a local, as a love letter to his hometown. And, he's expressing a love and an affection for his, and a respect, I think, for his hometown in a way only he could do. So I love that it's sort of turned around and that I get to reap the benefits of that, and other Arkansans get to reap the benefit of that. And on that note, on the legacy of this movie, I want to talk just a little bit about the 2014 version. I'm not going to give any spoilers just in case you haven't seen the 2014 version. I'm going to talk about it just kind of in a broad way, but if you haven't seen it, I would really encourage you to watch it, because I think that this is one of the better remake sequels that we've seen. And this, you really can call this one a requel. I know we have no end of ridiculous terms for these remake sequels, whatever, but this is, to me, a true requel.
Grandma, do you remember anything about the murders?
Your great-grandpa and your great-grandma lived in this house when it happened. He was the boogeyman, they said. Can't catch the boogeyman. Can't kill the boogeyman. Before that summer, everybody would leave their doors unlocked. And after the summer, you saw a stranger, you'd run the other way. And now, he's back.
What do you want?
Turn around. Do not look back.
What are you doing? What are you doing?
The town of Texarkana has awoken to a gruesome act of violence.
He could have killed me. He didn't.
He chose that girl to be his messenger.
They couldn't catch me 66 years ago, and they never will.
People say he was a demon or a spirit.
A soul consumed by vengeance.
We are not hunting a ghost. We are after a flesh and blood killer.
Just about everyone around here's got some kind of blood on their hands. He's gonna make the town pay for its sins.
Some days turn out great, it's okay. 'Cause some days turn out bright, it's alright.
Again and again until you make them remember.
And we learned from Andy, Phantom Killer 2014, that the reason this movie even exists is because the crew from American Horror Story, they were like in between seasons. And they didn't want these folks to get hired on other jobs and then not be able to come back for the next season of American Horror Story. So I said, what can we do for these folks? What project can we give them to keep them employed between seasons so that we get to keep them on? And Ryan Murphy, I guess, is a fan of the original Town That Dreaded Sundown. And he went to Jason Blum and said, hey, I want to remake this movie. And I want to use my American Horror Story crew. And Jason Blum was like not familiar with it, but he's like, listen, if you're passionate about it and you want to do it, sure. So he produced it, used his American Horror Story team. And the writer, whose name I do not have noted, decided to keep a lot of the foundation of what makes the 1976 version, but give it sort of a meta, fresh twist. So in the world of the 2014 version, the 1976 movie exists. And so the 2014 version opens with a girl and her date are watching The Town That Dreaded Sundown 1976 at Spring Lake Park. And they leave the movie and the Phantom Killer shows up and attacks her boyfriend. And so, oh gosh, he's back, And so it does feel very much, interestingly enough, it feels a lot like Scream, because you're trying to figure out throughout this movie, well, who is the killer? And you know it's not the original Phantom killer from the 40s because he would be dead. So who is this new Phantom killer? So it is set up very much like a Scream movie in that way, that it's this whodunit of you're trying to figure out who in her circle is the killer. And in addition to just the story, it's a super stylistic movie. Like the lighting is gorgeous. A lot of the sets are fantastic. I think the characters are really good and interesting. They update it for modern times. So a lot of the story beats are very similar. They recreate a lot of the kills because basically it's a copycat killer. So he's following sort of the MO of the 46 and 76 killer. So that's where the remake aspect comes in, right? Like we get the trombone scene again, but they make it more brutal. It's definitely a hard R. And to me, it's just a really well done sort of glow up from the 70s version. Also, as I mentioned earlier, parts of it are filmed in Texarkana. So the bulk of the movie in 2014 was filmed in Shreveport, Louisiana, which is like about an hour away. But the end of the movie, like the big chase scene, is in Texarkana. And so there's one building in particular that is in both movies, and it's the Union Station that I mentioned, this just gorgeous, like elaborate building in downtown Texarkana. And so to see it used in the 76 version, you see it in a couple shots, and it's actually like still operating as a train station. And then the 2014 version, it's this completely gutted out, dilapidated building, and there's a chase scene through this building. And to me, like I said, the fact that it's a real place and then we get it in both movies. I mean, I don't think there's any other horror movie that has done that. I could be wrong. I might be just misremembering. But again, like I said, I think the fact that it's like a threefold thing based on true events, 2 movies, both filmed in some of the same places. It's just, it's a really cool, like, full circle moment. And also, you know, one of the big themes of the 2014 version is this sort of like community trauma and generational trauma and these cycles of things. So it really does a good job, I think, of mimicking, you know, kind of like real art. It's that whole art mimicking life, life mimicking art thing. This copy of a copy of a copy. And also, I think the 2014 version has a really satisfying ending, both in the killer reveal and even just like the last shot. So watch both. If you haven't seen the 1976 version, I mean, if you're a horror nerd, I really feel like you need to. Goofiness aside, I think there's a lot of really good stuff going on in there. If you're a slasher fan, this is an early sort of, I've seen it referred to as a proto-slasher that you really need to check out. It's got a lot of early DNA, but it's unique, like I said, because of the authenticity of its Texarkana setting, and also because of its documentary style. It's different than any other, you know, early slasher you're going to watch. So thanks for tuning in today. If you were expecting to hear Frailty, I'm sorry, but it is coming. It'll be later this year, so stay tuned for that. I will be also releasing that Twin Peaks bonus episode with Randy from Straight Chilling. That should be out in May, I think. Like I said, I had to reshuffle a lot of stuff, so everything's sort of up in the air, but it's all coming. Next month, it's going to be another solo episode. I will be covering, finally, Wicker Man. I have had Wicker Man on my list ever since I started Religion and Horror a couple of years ago, but sort of avoided it, honestly, because Wicker Man is like an obvious religion and horror movie. And there were other things I wanted to do first, but it's time. And of course it takes place in May. And so, it's going to be May's episode. Gotta stay seasonally appropriate. So check out the Wicker Man. Get ready for May's episode. Also, I'm recording this in early April. I will be going to Overlook Film Festival a week from now. And so, you've probably at this point already seen on my social media coverage from Overlook, but I would imagine that I am probably going to be doing some kind of Overlook bonus episode as well. So like I said, there's lots of things coming. I don't know exactly when things are coming, but there's just a lot of fun stuff going on right now. And I'm excited to have so many things to cover. It's an exciting time in horror for sure. So, and until next time, don't wander down any lovers' lanes and stay spooky.